Jupiter, the Big 550 KTRS. Day job, though, is for STLtoday.com, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Good morning, Tony.
Morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly. Good to talk to you this fine Thursday morning.
Why do you want to pour water on all of our fun with Ken Bone here? What's the big deal? His 5 minutes of fame, and you're causing all sorts of trouble for the poor guy.
Now, I love me some Ken Bone. He is a fine, upstanding Midwestern human being. He seems to be a very nice man, but as you referenced, I wrote a column that was posted on STLtoday.com last night. It's actually my Friday column for print, but we here in the digital first world sometimes post things early online.
Right.
And my point isn't to criticize absolutely anything about Ken Bone. He's taking advantage of his 15 minutes of fame and actually turning it into longer than that, and good for him. My problem is that the media obsession with him is a symptom of what's wrong with our political discussion in America. It's why we have somebody like Donald Trump running for president. And the point that I make is that his question was an important question that dealt with, at the core of it, climate change. And this guy says he's undecided, and yet one of the major candidates, Donald Trump, says climate change is a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese. It's a joke, and except for this, most elected Republicans today, even those who are smart enough to have passed a science class in elementary school and junior high and high school and maybe even college, say that they don't believe in climate change. And they do so, I believe, out of a duplicitous sense of what they think they have to do to be a Republican today, to be elected in Republican primaries. And that is why you have national Republicans so apoplectic over what's going on with Donald Trump, because they realize that they created this ground that allowed him to take advantage of an angry electorate that's tired of getting lied to.
It was a very thought-provoking column, and one in which I think some of the criticism, you said that, Syria is sort of brushed upon. You have the biggest humanitarian crisis going on in the world, and, Syria was asked about, and was sort of asked about for 2 seconds, and one of the candidates said, I don't know anything about Russia, and I don't talk to my vice presidential candidate about it. So your overall premise that we're not keeping our eye on the ball, and yes, we can have our fun with a red sweater questionnaire, but the bigger question is, what are we going to do about it, Tony? Because if the candidates, and let me play Republican candidate who's going to get primaried, if I don't play the game, I'm going to be voted out of office, and then you're going to elect somebody who really doesn't think climate change exists.
Except for this, and this is the part that I think, and a lot of Republicans I know are having this discussion with themselves during this election cycle. There are Missouri Republicans who don't believe in climate change, in part because that's what their elected leaders have been telling them. There are Missouri Republicans who still believe that the president was born in Kenya and might be a Muslim, in part because that's what their leaders who have been elected and who talk on radio stations other than yours have been telling them. And so there comes a point where our leaders have to say, enough of the crap, okay? We're gonna turn this thing around. And the process of turning it around means learning from the Trump election cycle, and there are gonna have to be some courageous Republicans who are willing to lose over an election cycle or two in order to turn this process around. And I would suggest, and I would look at a couple of examples, that Republicans have gotten it wrong. I'm going to give you 3 examples over the last couple of years. Kurt Schaefer, Catherine Hanaway, and Sarah Steelman. I know all 3 of those people relatively well. They're all really smart. They're all really decent human beings. And they all had very reasonable, conservative to moderate Republican records to run on when they ran for Attorney General in the case of Schaefer, U.S. Senate in the case of Sarah Steelman a few years ago, and governor this year in Catherine Hanaway. And all three of those people ran the most inauthentic campaigns I've ever seen. They all three ran as crazy people that don't represent who they are as human beings in any way. And they all three got their butts kicked. And it's not because they weren't conservative enough in their campaign. They pretended to be as crazy as Donald Trump. It's that they weren't authentic. They came off as jerks. They came off as fakes because they didn't run as the good human beings that they are, as the smart, conservative to moderate, down the middle folks that they are. And I think that still works in Missouri. And when Missouri Republicans look at those three examples and look at, we need people like that in government, and we need them to start acting like who they are and stop pretending to be somebody else. That's the problem with the Kenny Bone story.
Interesting. Where do you place Eric Greitens on that? A lot of people said that he ran a somewhat inauthentic campaign with the AK-47 and the double-barrel bazooka guns, raining down bullets. People thought that was inauthentic, and yet he won that primary.
The difference between Eric and those three is nobody actually knows who Eric Greitens is. I mean, I can point to conversations and records with Schaefer and Hanaway and Steelman and be confident in who I think they actually are based on their records and based on my time getting to know them. Eric Greitens won't meet with me. Eric Greitens won't meet with hardly anybody. Eric Greitens is a guy who went from being a liberal Democrat to a right-wing Republican. I mean, nobody really knows who this guy is. So, yes, he won a primary pretending to be a guy who blows stuff up. But in part, he won that primary because he had so much money in the system that we have that is broken. In part, he won that primary because he was facing three candidates who were just not very good candidates. I think if Catherine Hanaway had run a campaign as who Catherine Hanaway is, it might have been a different campaign.
Tony Messenger, never dull around here, Tuesdays and Thursdays with us, and you read him all the time at stltoday.com. Tony, thanks for checking in. Have a good weekend.
Good to talk to you.
828 here, Big 550 KTRS. I am officially in love with Lily Marina